Hi Y Campers, my name is Sarah.
And my name is Grace.
And it's week 2 of Outdoor Adventure Skills.
Woo!
We're here at beautiful Camp Kauai this week. And we're gonna learn today how to set up a tarp.
So, your equipment that's needed is you need a tarp, a rope, and a tree, or multiple trees. If you don't have any rope, you can use strings or shoelaces or yarn or anything that you can find, just like what we used for the knot tying video. And instead of a tarp, you could also use a bed sheet or a blanket. And if you don't have any trees around, you can use a banister or a chair.
Before we get started on this video, we first want to acknowledge that we are meeting on the land that has been inhabited by Indigenous people from the beginning. As settlers, we are grateful for the opportunity to meet here, and we thank all of the generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years. Long before today, as we gather here, there have been Indigenous people who have been the stewards of this place. In particular, we acknowledge the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Pedwan, Odawa, and Haudenosaunee people. We recognize and deeply appreciate their historic connection to this place. We also recognize the contributions First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and other Indigenous people have made in both shaping and strengthening this community in particular, and our province and our country as a whole. As settlers, this recognition of contributions and historic importance of the Indigenous people must also be clearly and overtly connected to our collective commitment to make the promise and challenge of truth and reconciliation real in our communities and in our camps.
So before we get started with the tarp, I have a riddle for you.
Awesome!
So, I have large paws, but I'm not a lion.
Okay.
I have fur, but I'm not a cat.
Okay.
I sometimes live in caves, but I'm not a bat. I hibernate in the winter, but I'm not a squirrel. What am I?
Okay, so large paws, fur, hibernate. You'll have to tell me.
I'm a bear!
Oh, bear! Of course, hibernate! All right, so, Grace, why would we use a tarp in the outdoors?
We want to use a tarp to protect us from all the elements in case it's raining. We can go underneath it or store all of our gear underneath it. We can also set the tarp up above our tent for extra protection from the rain. And yeah.
Awesome. And what are some do's and don'ts of when you're setting up a tarp on your campsite?
So you want to make sure you're proactive about setting up your tent.
Okay. So what are some do's and don'ts about setting up a tarp on your campsite?
So you want to be Jeez.
Okay, one more time. All right, what are some do's and don'ts of setting up a tarp on your campsite?
So you want to be proactive about setting up your tarp. No one likes setting up a tarp in the rain or after dark. You want to make sure it's one of the first things that you're doing once you get to your campsite. And you want to make sure that you're putting it up on a downward slope, so the rain can easily pour off your tarp, so it's not just collecting in the middle. Because you want to make sure that all of your stuff underneath it stays dry. You can also use a ridge line to go right underneath the tarp, so then it is shaped just like an A.
Yeah. We're going to be doing a slope tarp today, right? But there's a ridge line as an option as well.
Yeah.
Cool. And one of the biggest don'ts about setting up your tarp on a campsite is make sure it's very, very far away from the fire. You don't want your tarp to get anywhere near open flames. So let's review some of the knots that we're going to be using today to set up our tarps.
So for our first knot, we want to review is the bow line. So for this knot, we are going to be tying it around our tarp. So what you do is you cross over your rope just like that. Remember, you go in the rabbit hole, around the tree, and back out the rabbit hole. and pull tight just like that. Remember, it looks like a person wearing a life jacket. And then for our other knot, for the second knot that we are going to use, we are going to do a trucker's hitch. So for the trucker's hitch, it's the knot that you're going to be tying around the tree. So Sarah's going to be holding one end of the rope as if it was attached to the tarp. You're going to wrap your rope around the tree like so. With the end that's tight onto the tarp, you want to tie a knot just like so. Grab the piece of the rope right in the middle and twist it around and just tie a regular knot, just like that. And then you have a nice loop there. And then you want to feed that rope through the loop and make sure that it is tight on there. So what you're going to do next is pull this rope above the rope that's tight right there and go underneath that rope and pull it through and make sure that it is tight on the tree. And that is a half hitch. So you're going to want to tie about 3 of those around to make sure that it is tight. And this altogether is the trucker's hitch.
If you want some review on tying your knots, go back to our first video, and we did lots of knots in the first week of wilderness skills. All right, now that we've reviewed our knots, it's time to get started with our tarp. So get your tarp or your bed sheet or whatever you're using ready, and here we go.
Awesome. So Sarah and I have our tarp right here with our 4 trees available for us to tie them to. So Sarah's one side, I have the other. We're going to start by...
What knot did you use to tie the tarp?
So you want to tie the bow line to your tarp right here. So you want to tie your rope to the tarp. You want to use your bow.
Restart!
Okay, so right here, Sarah and I have our tarp with our ropes and our trees. So what you want to do first is you want to tie your rope to your tarp. So that's where we're going to use our bowline knot. So Sarah and I have already went ahead and tied all of our ropes to each 4 corners of the tarp securely with the bowline. So our next step is that we are going to start by tying it to the tree. So we're going to go around the tree. Sarah and I are both holding it on each side because it's really important to make sure that your tarp is super tight so it's not collecting any water. So remember, with the rope that is tight on the tarp, we're going to make that loop knot. So now we both have our loop knot right there, rope wrapped around the tree, and then we're going to feed our rope through that loop. And then we're both going to pull tight, and now we are going to make that half hitch. So if you ever make a staircase bracelet, it's the exact same knot as that, where you make a 4 and just loop right under it. Perfect. So now Sarah and I have our first part of our tarp securely tied to our trees. So our next step is we're going to set up the back of the tarp. So like we mentioned, we're going to do like a slope to our tarp, just like a lean-to. So this side is going to be higher, and at the back we're going to go slightly lower on our trees.
Are we using all the same knots as before, Grace?
Yeah, using all the same knots, the loop knot and our half hitches. Remember to tie at least 3 half hitches to make sure it's super secure. Awesome, so now we have our tarp fully set up. See how it's on a nice slope here and it is super tight so all of the water can flow right off. So,
yay! Awesome! I hope your tarp looks just as good as ours. Thanks for joining us today at YCamp. I hope you enjoyed this video and I hope you learned lots. I know I sure did. If you'd like to work towards earning your virtual camp certification, go to ymcahome.ca/YCamp and tell us about how you did this activity.
Join us next week for campfire setup. If you're enjoying YCamp, please be sure to subscribe online and consider making a small donation to your local YMCA camp. Have an amazing day.
Bye, campers! Bye.